It was a long time ago. Old Wood. The very last question he asked me, he said, when does myth become reality? It's all to do with poverty and humanity and the ruthlessness of life. I miss his company. I miss our talks. It's he would know about, the power of electricity, the waves. He would know all of this stuff without ever having read about it. He would feel it. I miss the frustration of him. Extraordinary man. Frank came from the fisher folk on the Banff coast, on the east coast of Scotland. Very, very simple. I got to know him terribly well. He was an absolute menace. But he was very much a loner in the sense that he was so independent. He was so independent. I got to know him because as he and his wife grew older, his wife developed Alzheimer's. And his children, the children were living here, still in Aviemore, because having started life in Banff, he decided he wanted a bit of a good life for them, a better life than maybe the school at Banff could give them. And so he decided to come here because he knew about Aviemore and this area because of working at Inshriach. I remember seeing him in the Inshriach forest one day. I was bicycling through or something, or walking through, and there was this extraordinary sight up a tree because he made his own scaffolding. He made his scaffolding out of branches and sort of lashed them together and built up and built up. And there he was up there, chipping away. Amazing. I don't know, but people, as I say, they ask me when I'm in the pots there, and they see stuff of Frank's. And then we talk about Frank. And if they've been in the garden, they've got a lot to say. It's obviously moved them. Or else I get people looking at the small clay models I've got of Frank's, and they say, that looks interesting. And then I get people here at the pottery, and they're saying, we've been down there and it's quite extraordinary. It's difficult to find, unless you know. Unless you're looking for it especially. Well, they already had the Forestry Commission sign, you see, there. And so all they did was add the Frank Bruce Sculpture Park trail or whatever. And so that's why it's in such a small print. But it should be independent on its own, in big lettering, so people can see it. Pussy, I'll feed you when I come back. You've got some, actually. So the daughter had been coming here to make pots quite a lot. I was getting on quite well with her, and she was doing well with the pots. And so she said, I'm going to see if Frank would like to come over. Is that okay with you? So that's how I got to know Frank. And okay, he didn't like the clay, but it was something he could work with from his head to his hands. And that was his life, from his head to his hands always. What ideas he had, he would have to make them. So he was very interested in how we've become the way we are. And particularly, again, working with your hands. He would make some of these things into models to show me. I think I've still got some of them around. Have you seen this one? The lever. Christ at the Last Supper. They knew they were using the sceptre of the cross, of the crucifixion, as a lever. By ignoring and accepting the torture of the cross, he broke the lever. Which is really quite deep. That's the sort of thing he wanted to put along the wall at the back of the garden down there at Feshy. And then I got him special clay. And he made this one. He made that one specially. I had to make a bowl to fit the hand. It's a bit like a spider. But the white clay, he made much better detail. It was, it was a better clay for that sort of thing. This is me making a pot. Standing up instead of it being down here. But he built this specially for the sculptures, the little clay sculptures. A lot of his thoughts are demonstrated in his sculptures. In fact, all of them. He wasn't good at communication. He really was interested in historic matters and the way people used to live. Frank left school when he was about 13, I know that, with really very poor education because of dyslexia. He had lots of brothers and sisters. His father left the sea and started farming, I think. His mother worked as a cleaner in a big house, and he was allowed to look through the encyclopedias in the library in the big house. And he would sit and look at the pictures, and he got completely enthused by it as a young child. I would guess he was a young child, and he wanted to read the text. He really wanted to read the text. So eventually, he did teach himself to read, just a bit, just enough, and to write. His writing was appalling, and his spelling was phonetic. But he did teach himself that. After that, when he grew up, I don't know what he did, but he did a lot of different jobs. But at one time, he was working in the forestry just down here, just about 3 miles down here. You come to a big area of plantation, called Inchriach Forest. And he worked in Inchriach Forest and he loved the trees. So he started to carve them. And I think probably nearly all of his carvings that remain are from Inchriach Forest. And some of them are 20 foot high, some 2 or 3 feet high. We got the forestry to arrange to carry them over from Banff. And he got them all set up there, all erected. Fantastic thing to do. To start with, we were looking for Frank for where there was an area that would be suitable. And in the end, we plumped for the area where they are, which is down near Feshy Bridge, and it belonged to the Forestry Commission. It drove him mad, poor Frank, sitting in a room and being asked basic questions, you know, and having to follow a format, and then we had to type it all out and have this agenda. Committee meetings regularly. He couldn't cope with that. He'd never dealt with life like that. Anyway, it worked in the end because we got that piece of ground, which is actually very suitable. And a lot of the sculptures are inside of what was a walled garden. And so somehow it's a lovely area. I think it's a lovely area. I think it's very suitable down there. It's quiet, so you can concentrate on the sculptures. We had an opening of the garden.
Now, I like to think of Frank Bruce as the Dave Brubeck of sculpture. He's completely untrained. It's quite obvious that he's also a great artist, an instinctive artist, a natural. And the other thing about his art that's compelling is that it appears to grow out of the very form from which its materials are taken. Artists look at the world and remake it through their art, helping those of us who don't see with the depth and intensity that they see with to look harder and to see more. Look at Frank's work and you see the beat and brutality of the natural world as well as its heartbreaking beauty. And that's why it's absolutely right that the setting of Frank's work is a forest. Here it's brought back to its own home, and it brings us back to look at it with new eyes. So with these scissors, I hereby open the Frank Bruce Sculpture Park.
There should be something to give us an idea of how many people go. I can't think it's many, but I think it's quite steady because it's a very nice place just to walk around. People take their dog and they're taking their dog for a walk. It's an area that people walk their dogs a lot because of the river there, and it's attractive. And there was already a trail beside the river. They came in 3 trucks all at once. 1 or 2 they thought were too rotten. They left them there. They thought they'd just break up. It brings tears to my eyes even now to remember them arriving. It was just so wonderful. There's one huge one, and it was the first one that arrived. So they would haul these things up with the crane. They had to get them over the wall and into the garden. And we were standing in the garden waiting and watching. And coming up was this huge sculpture, and it's of brutality. It's a scene of brutality. And so it's a man with a mallet or whatever you like. And he's about to beat this woman right across her skull. And so he's got this huge muscly arm up in the air, and I think he's holding onto her hair down here. And so it's hugely dramatic in itself. And that was the first one to come over. It came swinging up and over the wall with this horrible, hellish scene there. It was extraordinary. And we were all just aghast about it. Look at that. Somehow it was so hugely human hanging there. And all the reality of it was suddenly pouring over us. As far as I recall, he was completely silent. I think we were all pretty silent, just crying. Let's have a look in the garden. And this is a beautiful one. It's really very, very beautiful, this. Just as a sculpture, not the subject matter, but the carving is really very, very beautiful. These go together. And this guy has two faces. He's got the face of horror and the face of, well, it says here, the onlooker. One looking in horror and the other in great sadness. I love that sweep of the wood too. It's just caught that, just the angle there. Sad. It's all very sad. And this is the horror-struck. And this is what's horrified him. And this is her hair coming down here. And this is the figure in here with her hair. And he's just going to obliterate her. I can't tell you anything about them. I mean, they're just, there it is, the archetype. The archetype, I think it's a wonderful one to have at the entrance to the walk. He's so big and he's so brave. Actually, he's covered in somebody's been eating him. He's quite hollow, isn't he? Oh. He's wonderful. He's pretty good, isn't he? The walker. Amazing concept, because it's an upside down tree. He's got his stick. Brilliant to get that. I think he's lovely. He would have been lovely down the street in Aviemore. He's lovely. This one is a lovely one. It's such an amazing thing to think up. Do we have an immortal soul? An immortal soul, imagine. Can you imagine? Do we really have an immortal soul? Do we have an immortal soul? Wait. This is her. Take the snow off her nose. It's called the Third World. The main figure holding a dead child. 3 figures with blinkers are representing the affluent nations, and the other one represents conscience. So it's conscience lying down there. What a shame. And these represent the nations with their eyes shut. It's heartbreaking. And oh no, look, the judge has gone. There was a judge judging the world. Oh dear. Oh. I wish he could be put back up. It's rotten all the way down. It's not going to last, is it? Oh. She's got these sort of supports here to hold the thing steady, but it's so rotten. The wood is so rotten. Look at it, it's hollow. What a shame. I wonder if I can speak to the forestry and ask just to have the remains. Because all of these will go. I could have a whole confederation of faces, couldn't I? All talking together at night when nobody's looking, having big discussions, having political discussions, and talking about Frank, and saying, well, yes, he got us quite well, but what could he do? He could only tell the world by making us. Yeah. Frank died about 5 years ago, and he wasn't looking after them before that because he really wasn't fit. when you said, "How are you, Frank?" he'd say, "So-so, so-so." And it was always so-so, always. And I remember thinking at one time, so-so, it's not very good, is it, so-so? You know, he was such a hardy man. And he wrecked his body with doing what he did, lifting a ton of stone, all on his own. I mean, it's old wood. He carved them probably 25 years ago. But it was so sad to see, you know, because they are disintegrating so quickly, to see them beginning to fall now. I couldn't believe that they're disintegrating so quickly, because Frank always looked after them, and he painted them with creosote or whatever, cuprinol. Yeah, the next one is the thinker, and I quite like him. I'd like to have him by my pond. I like that whole attitude of him. I think he will survive for a bit. You all right? He's nice. I really think it needs the water. It's lovely with the reflection when you do get that, the whole circle of thought, really. It's lovely. The very last question he asked me, he said, when does myth become reality? Well, it seems to be very important to me because it was maybe a couple of days before he died. And in itself, it was an intriguing question. When does myth become reality? So it stayed in my mind. And I still don't really have an answer for that.